Welcome everybody to day 19 of Breaking Through Your Matrix Programming. My name is Jona, Bryndis.
And I'm Jeff Casper. Hey, everyone.
And we will, as we have been the last 18 days, be your energy trainers and energy coaches here today, illuminating the inner and outer aspects of our binds to the struggles of our lives and how to get over them.
Mm-hmm.
Yesterday, we got deep into the approach to how to let go of those things that are impeding our lives. Today, we're going to look a little deeper into how to transcend each and every of these barriers or these impedances, these resistances, as we called them yesterday, how we can transcend those. But before we get started, welcome everybody.
Yes.
Thank you for watching. We're doing this live, as you know, and we appreciate your comments. Don't forget to push the like button. Yes, and we're getting people logging on here so we can see you in the live chat. Please continue commenting. Even if you're watching the edited version here, we will respond. Wonderful. So when we talked about letting go yesterday, we found out that there are some things that we think we are letting go by, for instance, cutting them off from ourselves or pretending we don't care. They call it in psychology, dissociate from things. That's like a very common way of coping with stressors. And we all know that there's several layers to this now, because just sort of cutting things off is not doing the job. So we're going one step deeper here into why it is so difficult sometimes to let certain things go. There are different scenarios, of course. There are things such as belongings, okay? So it's one thing to deal with things that we need to let go simply because our life circumstances change or because of outer conditions. Then there's a letting go that is involved with life choices. For instance, when we decide to have children, there are certain things that we need to let go of. Then there are things that we are forced to let go, say through the loss of something or when somebody takes something away from us. Then we also have those things that we lose due to the cycle of life, like the loss of a loved one and so forth. So there's different dimensions of letting go, but the procedure of feeling out how we can actually reduce the ties, the energetic attachment to what it is that we are letting go is the same. And so we talk about energetic attachment here in the sense of anything that can hold us back, anything that can create a tie with us and therefore requires our attention. Now, when it comes to the practical application, as we all know, it can be quite difficult sometimes to let go of a certain convenience that we have, or to let go of a certain belief that we have, especially when it comes to these etheric aspects of our energy being, namely the things in the subtle realm, the things that are not so obvious for us. And of course, all our unconscious patterns and habits that we've illuminated here over these past weeks. Yeah, so we're up against a multitude of different resistances. And we introduced to you yesterday that the most efficient way to let go is to observe your own resistance. What is it in you that is keeping you there, that is making it difficult for you to let go of a belief, to let go of a person, or to let go of a belonging? We need to look at the inner attachment to things, not so much the outer. That's the bottom line. And when we illuminated this yesterday, we talked about things such as pacing and how we can simply, through slowing down our reactivity, so to speak, how it opens up new options for us. how we can see new solutions in everything. And this is what we want to dive a little deeper into here today, namely the subjectivity of how we perceive time and what we can do from within or through certain new habits that we could establish, how to slow this down. So there's a thing with our perception, as we've already talked about, that binds us to the energetic state that we are in. So depending on our energetic state, we will perceive the world around us, ourselves, and others. We will also perceive our options based on the energetic state that we're in. So how can we efficiently learn to change, to shift our energetic state, as we explained yesterday, no matter where we're at? Let's say you know where you're at, but you're still up against this resistance. And some of you commented on this yesterday, which was really cool, because this is something that we all run into. So this has nothing to do with how well we understand the theory of this. This has to do with how can we actually get ourselves from a lower state into a higher state, as this is how we defined self-healing. Every time we raise our vibration above the problem, above how we see the problem. So you can see here's two parts, right? One part is to eliminate our attachment to what is holding us back. The other part is increasing the options, increasing the field of possibilities, so to speak, increasing the time we have to respond versus just reacting out of conditioned hardwires or matrix programming, for that matter. Yes, and once more here, hello to everybody. As there's more people logging on, we see you guys, we see your hearts and where you're from. This is wonderful.
Yes.
All right, there is a question here already, which is actually really cool. This is where we're going with this. Do we have an overall energetic state to establish patterns? And then when these energetic traits get triggered, do they get triggered through daily interactions? This is something that we've talked a little bit about when we talked about daily exposure. This was in the early days. There is something that triggers a certain energetic state in us, or can trigger a certain energetic state in us through the energy around us in our immediate environment. But remember, there's different dimensions of that. So we have the immediate environment, like say in our home, then in our village, then in our country, then in the entire collective. So there's different layers of daily exposure that we have. But basically, Sandra, and that's why this is such a cool question, there are energetic states that are continually being triggered in us, and those are the ones that we mean when we talk about matrix programming. We are up against a larger bombardment of certain energetic states that keeps pushing us into these. So it's kind of like a current that we have to swim against. And in the energy updates that I do, I talk about this a lot, how the current ratio of, like, say, people who are aware of this and learn how to out-vibrate these collective energies compared to people who just basically swim with the current is probably 1 to 9, which means only 1 person out of 10 persons that you meet will actually vibrate on a higher vibratory state or higher consciousness level than the overall collective. And that then puts us into a place that can feel hostile sometimes, because we're working so hard, on keeping our vibratory state up, and yet, just going outside or just watching TV, any type of exposure to collective energies then can pull us back into that. So this is why I do these collective energy updates every week, because it gives you a little bit of a heads up that what you're experiencing is not necessarily just yours. And in fact, for the majority of the deeper processes that we feel like we're being thrown into on a day-to-day basis, they have a lot to do with outer energies, with collective energies affecting us. Thanks for asking that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and here's another cool question. Julianne is asking, feeling something bad is going to happen before it happens. What do you do then? You know, your energy is already going there. This is part of the training that we do here at TransCODES, namely to help energetically sensitive people who are naturally perceiving or naturally transceiving, say, precognitive energies or collective energies. And this needs to be trained. So today we're actually going to talk about exactly that, how you can train through daily practice to become less susceptible to outer energies, but also to deal with your own daily fluctuations. So right. We talked about that also in the first couple of days, the different factors that influence our energy. And this could be anything, of course, from our, physical health, if we are sleep deprived, or if we dehydrated, or if our immune system goes low, then of right. course our etheric immune system, our energy system gets more susceptible to outer influences as well. Mm-hmm. Yes, and weather conditions can contribute to that as yes. well. Energetically sensitives have a natural tendency towards warmer climates, guys, simply because it allows the body to relax a little more. And then we feel these outer energies coming in as not so pressuring. So there are certain preferences, say, that form in us when we are discovering that we're energetically sensitive. And one of them is that we usually tend to like sunny weather and warmer weather, milder weather, better than extreme weather. It's just like with energies. So what happens when we're exposed to extreme energies, and this is exactly where we're going here with this today, is that we perceive these impulses from the outside to resonate with what is coming in. This is an unconscious process, meaning that anything that happens around you will have an effect on you, yes. even if you're not labeling yourself as an empath or energetically sensitive person. Energies tend to want to vibrate in resonance with another. They try to go where the other is, and depending on the power of the energy that comes in, it will have a stronger pull or push. All right, it's like a high and a low pressure area in meteorology. So when somebody is in a low energetic state, then their his or her energies are contracted, and they form sort of a pull into that field. And when someone is in an expansive state, which is more like a high pressure area, then their energies will radiate outward more. All right. So the susceptibility that we have to one of these states has a lot to do with where we are at a certain moment. Mm-hmm. And if we are in an ego state, in the red zone, in one of those contractive states, then our propensity will be to go to yep. to all these other low pressure areas. And if we are in a higher vibratory state, we will gravitate towards other situations, other people, and other energy fields that are higher vibratory. This is what is meant with resonance. So this is a natural and a physical effect that has to do with things in nature, in the universe, trying to work together, trying to balance another out, or trying to mirror another. Yes, we're getting a lot of comments here on the cold, mm-hmm. And how energetically sensitives often suffer from cold. Yes, I'm from Iceland and I live in Colorado, and I can sing a song about this. Yes, This is something that we need to see as part of our constant adjustment, feedback, and then correction process in our lives. We have to look at these conditions. If we feel like we are constantly sort of fighting against our daily conditions, then it's like I said yesterday, it's a huge waste of energy. This is all energy that you could use for creativity, for lovingness, or for manifestation. But let's go deeper into like how we can practically approach this. If we have established here that if we look at everything as energy, then it changes our perspective a little bit. We begin to become a bit more neutral to things, then we can say, okay, this energy is good for me, or this energy is not good for me. So discernment is what we've worked on here all these days. And now, as we are conscientious about where our energy goes or where it's at, we need to work on developing strategies for each of these states that as they come in. And one of the reasons why I mentioned slowing down and pace as major tools for establishing more time to respond versus reacting to our hardwired patterns, and also for enabling us to see more options and to get a larger perspective on things, has to do with mental disciplines. We all know that the thinkingness of our ego mind is one of the huge big distractors. And so we constantly have this mental churning going on in our head that distracts us from, being in our center, being consolidated, and feeling, connected within. And so the first way to approach this is to actually go in and ask yourself, how can I slow my mind down? Okay, you won't be able to stop your mind. Generations have tried that. This is not possible, but you can slow down your mind and actually, how we like to call it, you can turn down the volume of your mind. Okay, so you can let all this go on, but without paying attention to it. And one of the ways, and this is common knowledge, to accomplish this is to go into meditation. And I want to do a brief excursus here into brainwaves and why meditation works. This is just a tiny overview here, but there are different states in which your brain oscillates. And in these different frequency states, different things happen within you, different connections within your nervous system and within your consciousness are being accomplished. And so we look at the beta state as the normal thinking state, that we all have. There's no quality as to the consciousness level of this, but it is the state here right now where I'm mostly working, with my left brain, and I'm working, thinking, conceptual, rational, and I'm willing to function in 3D. This is the place where most people spend most of their time in. Then we have the alpha state, and we all know this. This is the place where we relax. This is the place, when we listen to music, when we take a bath. This is we're not really in a different state of consciousness. We're just not under so much bombardment from the outside or from within. So it's a relaxed state, and it allows us to learn better. It allows us to be more attentive to things. And this is the first state that people get into when they begin to connect within, namely starting to, just physically relax. And that's what the breathing is for. So alpha is something that we all go into several times a day. Some of us maybe not as often as we wish to, but it is a good state for us to contemplate. The states that allow us to actually move into higher states of consciousness, but without, like, say, having to take any altering substances or anything like this. They are embedded in our brain frequency as well, and we go there too mostly during our sleep, but without being aware of it. So there is a lot of processing in our dream state and in our non-dream sleep state. And meditation now is the practice of trying to make this become more aware to us. And so there is the theta state of our brain that is the state in between sleep and awake. And we all know this. There's a state that allows us to be really attentive and yet physically not so much involved in what is going on. And that is the state that is usually targeted through meditation. So if we build a good daily practice of meditating, then we can learn how to work with theta states. And there's different states in theta as well. So it's not just one, it's a slower frequency in which we can, enter this transcendental state that so many write or talk about. But there's also states that can, feel like we're not really in our body anymore. I don't want to mystify this too much because there's a lot of research that has been done on this. And here at TransCODES, we have developed a whole series of meditation tools, and with the Sacred Self-Healing program that these lessons are from, we deliver meditations with the theta metronome, with the subliminal theta metronome, with all our daily meditations, simply to help a person to get into this place on a physiological level, on a neurological level, quicker. And then there's the delta state, which very few people really ever learn how to master the state and not fall asleep while practicing this. It is almost like a near-death state of our brain. It's when there really isn't much of the thinkingness, of the rational thinkingness going on. It is going on, but it is not in our awareness. And so a lot of people experience those states in deeper sleeping. But there is a lot of things that still happen on this frequency level. And that's why some companies and ourselves as well use these states for learning, use these states for internalizing things. So that's why the just thinking our way to our true self, say, does not work that well. It has to be experienced, but the problem with the experience is that on these levels of consciousness, our mental brain, if you will, is more or less shut down. And that then creates one of the biggest dualisms here to overcome on this journey, namely, how can you get past your mind and past, this constant churning thinkingness, and for most of us, filled up with tons of critical inner voices. So ultimately, the practice of meditation is instrumental for us to learn how to slow down the volume, how to slow down the speed, and how to navigate sort of our inner world rather than being too distracted by reacting to the outer world.
Yes.
And this is a whole microcosmos that opens up for a person at that stage of the journey. And most of TransCODES modalities really play out in that realm. This is what we do here. This is what energy training does. We've looked into energy work just a little bit compared to what is out there when a person actually begins this inner journey. Our tip here for you listeners right now is to really just internalize this as in form of committing yourself to this daily practice of meditating. It doesn't really matter if you know whether you get into alpha state or theta state. Forget about that. All right, that's just your mind trying to control the process again. Think of it this way. Every time you connect within, every time you do an I am breathing, every time you slow down. You consciously, actively slow down. All right. You are raising your vibration.
Right. And daily meditation can be a really good practice with all these things we've been discussing about going into the heart, feeling these things out, introspection, contemplation. It's a really good opportunity to learn about also letting go of things. A lot of times when you start meditating, if you haven't, or if you've gotten away from it for a while, the mind will go into overdrive. And it's a really good practice to get into just letting things go.
Yeah, we do also point out that there is no specific form or procedure needed. Everyone can meditate. You do not need to wear red socks or need to be in a certain body position or eat certain foods or anything like this. This is a specialness, one that can help you maybe to condition yourself throughout a day, maybe to meditate at a certain time of the day.
Right.
This usually helps people. It's very important that you let go of the way you think it needs to be. Remember, this links you right back into your attachment to not being good enough, and and how you have to be. So let all that go. Make a goal to do 5 minutes a day. All right, start out like that. In 5 minutes, we have 5-minute energetic adjustment tools,
Yes.
and 5-minute mini meditations that we provide for free for people to just get into this habit. And you can also do this while you're doing other things. So you're fully functional in theta. It takes a little bit of training to not fall asleep in theta, but once you can do this, then you will find that daily activities, especially the repetitive type of activities, like washing dishes or walking your dog or folding your laundry or whatever it is that you do that doesn't really involve thinkingness. They lend themselves very well to practicing meditation. And we often also just call it a contemplative state. So there's no form needed. However, if you want to get into these deeper states of consciousness faster, then you got to look at it like an athlete would. It's a new training technique. You got to practice it. You got to build muscle memory. That's why we have so many energy sessions here at TransCODES going on every week, because it's something that literally needs to be repeated over and over and over again until you can, I don't want to say master. I wouldn't even maintain that about myself, that I can master these states, but I can go there at will. Let's put it this way. Then it becomes a matter of being able to hold this. And then it's about the content that you bring in. So that's when people say, I need to meditate over this or that. That's when you bring in some of these higher vibratory alignments that you have. So what Julianne asked earlier about some of the precognitive stuff that we deal with, and I'll get to answering your question here in a minute, but then you can use meditation for various things.
Yes.
Not just letting go. You can also use it for connecting with your inner higher guidance, with your inspiration, with your creativity, with your future even, and dedicate time to go there. To allowing yourself to go there then becomes the practice. Once you know how to get there, it's more or less a matter of committing to yourself that this is where you want to spend some time of the day to help to release some of the stored energies and to let go of some of the things, but also to invite, new options, new opportunities in, so that you can then on a conscious level later work with them and follow up on them, make corrections if needed, and so forth. People who regularly meditate, and this is not a question anymore, have higher levels of health, higher levels of contentment, and usually also a higher consciousness level. So they're able to hold higher vibratory states better, simply because of what we mentioned earlier with the container. They're better able to control or they're in more awareness of their energetic states, and so they can make corrections right away. So when it comes to transcending a specific state, and here, Julian, I want to point out for everybody, it doesn't really matter whether the state was induced or triggered by, like, say, a dream or a thought or something that you read or something that somebody else said. All those are just energies. So the trigger becomes secondary when it comes to actually dealing with energetic states.
Yep.
Now that you are going there, that's what you are looking as your energetic reality right now. So you are in this now. How can you get out? This is what transcendence of ego states, or transcending your ego, what this really means. So here is like the bottom line of this entire training course here for you, that it does not matter where it comes from.
No, it does not.
Yes, we have a weather condition, we have a matrix that heavily influences, and for the majority of the population on this planet, and therefore creates outer conditions. All right, but it's no more than weather conditions. All right, so at the end of the day, we all have not only the ability, but also need to claim this right to determine what energetic state we want to be in. And the way this is done, we've introduced this to you yesterday. Today, we wanted to look at, okay, what do I do if I get caught here? What do I do if I get caught here? Just so that you get a little bit of an idea why we have talked over 10 hours about all these different layers of ego, attachments, and energies with you, because it's way more complex than people think it is. Okay, you guys have already familiarized yourself with this chart. This is the same chart that we looked at the last couple of days, just with a slightly different aspect to it. Namely, how can I transcend myself out of a specific state or phase? And what is the energy, the higher vibratory healing resonance, as we call this, that you need to align yourself to get out of this place? Right? And if we look into this a little deeper, then you will see that it's kind of simple, but it's not easy. All right, so let's look at this here for a few minutes. How can we tackle certain energies? And then we want to close up today with pointing out one more time that it's not so much just those energetic states, but it's also the cycles and patterns that are linked into this, which make it so difficult for us to withstand the daily drama of our ego stories playing out. So here we're just looking at the ego states for a second to get an overview over what it is that we are dealing with. So let's say you're dealing with a fear. This is something that most people can relate to without having to come up with the major fantasies. Fear is something that we all have. We talked about this, why it's important. And our ego has a set strategy to deal with fear, namely either run away, fight whatever it is, or freeze. These are the three matrix reactions that we have stored in our neurological system. Let's say you find yourself in a place of fear, and you find yourself persistently in the state of fear and anxiety. And you ask yourself, what is it that is holding me back? And yesterday we pointed out that at some point of the letting go process, you may run into like, I don't really want to leave the state, because I'm getting something out of it. This, of course, already requires you to be really honest with yourself, and to allow yourself to be self-reflective enough to understand that the reason why you want to continue staying there is because you're getting something out of it. Let's say you know what you're getting out of it. Let's say subconsciously, you know that it's the victimhood, and the victimhood allows you, to blame things onto others, and it
Mm-hmm.
allows you to not having to take responsibility for things because your core fear is making a mistake. And that is something that comes from your childhood, that's linked into your inner child aspects. Let's say we're making this up here as we go. There's a karmic aspects that have played into all of this. You were born into a situation where there was a lot of punishment for making mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And all this sort of your wheel is complete. As a result of this, over your lifetime, you've created, a false self that pretends that you always know the answer and that you never make mistakes. And as soon as something bad happens, your pattern is to go into blaming somebody else or something else. Okay, this is a very typical sort of fear cycle that people have. That keeps on pulling back in fearful situation, fearful dreams, fearful manifestations that all are contextualized from the perspective of, I do not want to deal with this, I cannot handle this, and I need to somehow cope with this by blaming this onto something else. Here, if you look at this entire row, you'll see a few things that you can work on, few arrows, upward arrows that point into this. So some of it has to do with grounding.
Mm-hmm.
That's something we mentioned here at the beginning, how, for instance, food and drink, like being dehydrated, can induce a state of anxiety in us, triggered through physical reactions, through hormones, through neurotransmitters, or the lack of certain neurotransmitters. Then in the second column, you see your stance, how you make a stand for yourself, how you know yourself, how you know your core values, who you are, what you stand for. And that is usually something that is lacking a little bit when somebody persistently goes into fear with every situation, or as a reactive pattern with outer situations. So the person needs to work on, like really investigating, what are my core values, what are my core needs. Fear has a lot to do with these unmet needs that we talked about, and also the lack of proper boundaries. Because if I don't really know who I am, then it is very easy to invade my space. So if I don't fully inhabit that space, I'm more or less, not as in my fault, but I mean, this is what happens energetically, inviting other energies in. So we need to work on our stance there through these energy training lessons that we've shared with you, that all lead to that place that you become more secure and more empowered about what you truly are. And then if you look at the third column, where you see anxiety, and there's an arrow up that says coping, here is where you really need to be bone crushing honest with yourself and look at, like, what are all these things that I've adopted over my life that I use or misuse for coping with my fear instead of dealing or facing it. This could be anything from substance addiction to workaholism, or blaming mechanisms. It could be anything. It's a coping mechanism. So anything basically that your ego presents to you as justification. What is your ego story, is the kind of question that you can ask yourself here.
And usually with fear, a lot of times it's dealing with avoidance. It's dealing with not facing things, not taking responsibility. So everything in coping, typically with fear, deals with avoiding, dodging, and getting away from things, so you don't have to face that fear.
So those are things that you can focus on, like the grounding. Make sure that you have a good physical, connection with the earth, that you have good food and water, working on who am I, what do I stand for? What are my core values? What are my needs and what are my boundaries? And then instead of coping, really actively working on those boundaries, bit by bit. And therefore, then if you look further to the right, then gain more respect, for yourself, which will then bump your energy up into the next higher state. And remember, self-healing is shifting your energy into the next, or this can be we can do quantum leaps as well, but typically for us in a given situation, it happens in increments. So here comes anger. And this is, guys, where you need to pay attention, because the reason why we feel like we have a glass ceiling and we keep on finding ourselves in the same state or below, and we can't get past a certain state, is usually because there's something there that is repressed, or that we are not allowing ourselves to do. For someone who's caught in anxiety, it's very often the repression of anger. So the release of anger then can help with bumping your energy up. And this may sound contradictory. It's certainly contradictory to most of the beliefs in spiritual circles that anger is bad. But it actually is much better than fear. You just can't stay there. So you have to continue working on getting past your anger, understand the necessity and the healing power of releasing your energy and finding healthy ways to express your anger, but then move on. And then you will come into a place where you feel a little more in control, which at first will feel good. But then if you stay there, you'll try to control your situation too much. You'll try to control people around you too much, and you'll get caught in that cycle of criticizing yourself. And then you get into the place of fear again, because the criticism now is what triggers, your fear of the future again, and then you'll find yourself in this constant cycle of, fear, anger, judgment, fear, anger, judgment. This is where a lot of people are caught in that cycle.
Right. And also, as you keep working this, just accept you'll have a few of these loops, but what you're working on is slowly getting that loop to get less, or to bring up your energy more and more, and then eventually that loop loses its power. As you let go of the charges and the payoffs, and you face the fear and you face the avoidances, then all of a sudden that loop begins to lose its power, and you begin to notice you're more into a little bit more control. You feel like you have a little bit more energy. You're going less into criticism. Then all of a sudden you feel this huge shift in your energy, and your stance becomes stronger, and then it keeps going.
Yes. It is the hardest part really is to see how it's self-perpetuating, how we never really move out, even if we have the temporary feeling that something is getting better.
Right.
But at the end of the day, most of us are caught in these loops. And so when you are actively working on transcending certain states, you've got to observe that too. Like, what is the loop here? Another very typical loop is the pain anger cycle. All right. So there's a lot of us, who feel sort of in a very subdued place. We feel pain all the time, whatever, kind of pain it is. And we may find ourselves in a state of depression, and we're not really sure how to get out of that. Well, this first step here is to, moving up basically in our energy, is to admit to our fears, to acknowledge our fear, and to face some of that, because as soon as you face even just a tiny little speck of fear, your energy will rise.
Yes.
And then a lot of times people become angry about that, because now they're starting to realize, I'm in pain all the time because the ego, creates those justification stories again, right? Because, of him, or because of the system, or because of the matrix, or whatever. And once more here, anything that you don't really release then will create a backlash, and it will pull you into, like, say, you've vented your anger, and you say, I've had enough of you, and blah, 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 and then the next thing you know, you're in guilt, about what you just did. So your energy drops, because this is actually what's underneath your pain, the avoidance of guilt. And so you feel guilty for a moment, and then go back into the place of pain. This is, guys, where the etheric attachments come in, because we all have sort of a default thing that we fall to. It's different for each and every one of us, but the cycle around it is the same for everyone. So, I am very susceptible to guilt and shame. That's a karmic attachment that I have. Jeff is very susceptible to pain. Then other people, that I know, they're very susceptible to fear. So, this is different for each and every one of us, how fast and how strong we fluctuate between those states. But what we want to point your attention at today is looking at the patterns, at the cycle, at the loop that is playing there. So that we can begin to actually realize that all we really need to do is to catch it before it can latch on, is to get to that place where we can see the beginning of the cycle. And when something like that happens, as Julianne brought in the beginning, like a precognitive dream about the future, it is not the content of the dream. It is not what you saw, Julian. It is your reaction to it that is now binding you to the energetic state. And it doesn't matter how you got there. You're now dealing with fear. And what is it that you need to release in order to get past fear? You need to work on healthily releasing and acknowledging the anger about the situation. Okay, because there's something in that dream that does not allow you to actually face it. It leads to deflection, all right? And that makes us angry. That keeps us in the state of anger. It's that state of inner conflicts, where we have a battle going on within, all right? Then face the battle.
Right.
Catching things before they latch on is what requires a lot of training. This is basically what we teach people how to do this here at TransCODES, an energy coaching session and energy transmissions. But if you go deep down, you will find that there are places within you that you keep coming back to. And let me point this out for most of you. It is the critical inner voice. It is this part here that as soon as that gets triggered, be it through outer criticism or inner criticism, that that will bind you to these lower vibratory cycles or patterns within. Now, when we look at the higher vibratory cycles, there are cycles as well. They're just not detrimental. They're actually expansive. So we can work those for our advantage. Then we will see that there are states that they still have to do with, working through things. So once we get past the barrier of truth and are really willing to accept truth the way it is and go into honest self-reflection, then we'll feel empowered and we'll have courage. We're not going to be like past our ego yet. We'll just have enough energy to break out and make changes and put them into action. This is the objective of this 21 days video series here, to get you into this place of empowerment and courage to actually make a change. Then comes the work on the change, and that has a lot to do with your ability to understand, what some of these patterns are that you're up against, to accept them, to learn how to work them, how to be present with yourself all the time and others as well, how to allow some of that trust, that we talked about, into your higher guidance and into your inner higher power to take effect and carry you past these impedances until you finally arrive at a place that we call heart consciousness, where the susceptibility to ego, karma, and collective energies becomes very, very small. So this is the ultimate goal, is to get past these two barriers really within us, these two energetic barriers. And that is truth. And as we get past truth, we begin to see things, we'll begin to understand things. This is the awakening state here, 6, 7, and 8. This is when we begin to have these precognitions, when we begin to see the larger context, and when we begin to connect with our higher perception. But this is still influenced by our ego mind. And that's why in this phase, the critical inner voice, that pulls us back into judging and criticizing ourselves is our biggest enemy, if you will. So that's why meditation becomes so important in this phase of your journey, because you have to learn how to calm that down. You can't vilify your inner critic or try to cut out or get rid of your ego. No, those are all valid parts of you. Remember, it's about wholeness. Healing is about wholeness, okay? So you can't just cut them out. You have to learn how to live with them. And the way you do this is by using meditation as one of the tools to transcend all these different things as they come in. And it isn't until then that you've actually reached the state of immunity, so to speak, from matrix programming, namely when you are willing to let go of your mind. It is the mind that got you here, but it cannot get you past the heart barrier. This second barrier that allows you to completely transcend collective karma and your personal karma cannot be reached with the mind. It can only get you to the state here of number 8. And that's it. Then you have to be willing to surrender your mind and fully trust in your heart. That's those are the basics of transcending certain states of consciousness and actively working with them. Yes. So there's a lot of comments here about meditation and this practice. It is it's one of those things that we need to internalize, literally, go in and commit to doing this. And just a little heads up here for those of you who have difficulties with meditating. It took me more than 20 years to learn how to meditate, guys, okay? And part of that was, I think I mentioned this before, was the belief that meditation is the state of non-thinkingness. Somebody told me when I was like 8 years old, well, in order to meditate, you just need to stop thinking. And then I spent 20 years in trying to not think, which of course doesn't work because it creates an endless loop in itself. All right, so it wasn't until I learned to let go, learned to surrender, what my mind does. When I didn't see the mind as the enemy anymore, when I learned that this is all part of me and that's all right, but I'm going to turn down the volume. I'm going to let my mind be there, but I'm not going to let my mind dominate it. This is the secret, really, of energy work, is to accept all these parts in you, including your inner child, your shadow, some of your masculine, feminine imbalance, some of the beliefs, and some of the unhealthy expressions that you have, to allow them to be there, but to not give them any power. So transcendence really comes down to fully facing what it is that you need to get past, but by letting go and surrender to that higher vibratory power in you that can mend, that can heal. Yes, and I know this was a bit technical here today, but it's important for us to understand that you're dealing with different conditions every time you find yourself in a different energetic state. And we work extensively here with this TRANSCODES. This way we have an entire self-healing community around the Sacred Self-Healing Program, because there is so much need to actually process some of the things that happen on these different levels, that it is very healing, to be surrounded by people who do the same thing. Now, when we are becoming ready to let go of the mind, then the processing stops. And we do not recommend to over-process things, as we have mentioned in the past. But we do see the necessity to understand certain things to be able to move past them. Yes. So this really concludes the end of the lesson for day 19. With this video, you're going to receive a download link for a 5-minute energy alignment, a 5-minute mini meditation called True Self, just aligning your energy to your true self states, and helping you to build this daily practice. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about one more time how all this now plays out when we are in conjunction with other people in relationships. How does this play out? How is our ability to maintain and manage our personal energies now interacting with others? And we are going to talk about extremely important mechanics of energetic interaction, namely energetic absorption and energetic projection. A lot of empaths have this problem that they tend to absorb outer energies too much, and tomorrow we're going to go really deep into what you can do to prevent this from happening. Wonderful. Yes, the energy work technique that we introduced here is called Transcendence, and the energy work transmissions that go with Transcendence are really all of our energy transmissions, but especially the Sacred Self-Healing Program. And before you go, a quick shout out. On our last day, on day 21, we would love to have your guys' experience. This is a shout out to anyone who has been following us here on these 21 days, breaking through your matrix programming, or who is an active member of the Sacred Self-Healing or Heart Warrior program. Please share with us in a video or audio or text how this understanding has helped you. Really short, just like maybe 10, 20 seconds, all right? Just something that we can show here that the real people working this and how this is affecting people's lives. That'd be wonderful. Thank you. Don't forget to subscribe and smash the like button. We see you tomorrow, same time for day 20. Bye-bye.